The group of five huddled together in the dimly lit alley, their eyes scanning the darkness, their hands nervously clutching the equipment slung over their shoulders. They had been tracking this figure for weeks, following a trail of subtle clues and whispered rumors that hinted at the existence of something or someone extraordinary. They were not scientists, but they were trained observers, and they knew the signs of something out of the ordinary. This was it. This was what they had spent countless hours preparing for, studying and analyzing. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a soft-spoken expert in xenobiology, stepped forward, her voice steady but firm despite the knot of unease in her stomach. "Let's take a closer look," she said, her tone neutral, detached from the fear festering beneath the surface. "Maybe we can learn something." Ryan Nguyen, a young radar technician, shook his head vehemently, his eyes lighting up with warning. "No, no, no," he whispered urgently. "We don't want to scare it away." His hand still clutched the radar gun, his gaze fixed intently on the figure. "It's been watching us for hours. Maybe," he said under his breath, "we've already scared it off." The figure halted midway between the group and the alley entrance, its unyielding stare refusing to waver. Maria's arm slipped across Ryan's shoulders, steadying him. The cold crunch of gravel beneath the figure's feet served as a stark reminder that this was no mere illusion. Nick, the team's leader and an ex-Marine, hefted his backpack heavy with supplies, eyes scanning the figure yet also furtively eyeing his fellow team members, as if questioning whether they had truly gone in prepared enough. It was Jake who finally broke the silence before he knew he should. "I don't like this," he said, his voice barely audible above a whisper, a fear etched on his pale face. "Something doesn't feel right." "Not much more has to happen," Maria muttered softly beside him. The silence stretched, and the air held its breath as the figure took another deliberate step closer. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes never left the figure, her thoughts racing with the implications of this discovery. She had dedicated her career to the study of xenobiology, the study of life beyond Earth's boundaries. The thought that her career's work could actually be more than a theoretical concept was almost too much to bear. Ryan's hands shook slightly as he held his radar gun, his eyes fixed on the figure's steady advance. "What if it attacks?" he asked his teammates, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "We're not equipped to handle anything, whatever that is." Nick's expression was a mask of steady calm, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. He took a step forward, his deep voice low and even. "Ryan, we came here prepared for every possibility. We've analyzed every data packet, every shred of information. This is what we've been training for." The silence that followed Nick's words was oppressive, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath the figure's feet. It seemed to be waiting for something, but what, Maria could not quite fathom. Sarah, the team's resident historian, watched the figure with rapt attention. Her eyes gleamed with a sense of excitement, and for a moment, it was as if she was already imagining the groundbreaking discoveries that could be made. Jake's fear only seemed to deepen, his voice filled with a quiet desperation. "Can't we just get out of here?" he asked, his words laced with desperation. "What if it's some kind of trap?" The figure halted again, its unyielding gaze never wavering. It seemed to be studying the team, sizing them up as any predator would its prey. Dr. Rodriguez's mind was racing, her thoughts a jumble of possibilities. What was this creature? What did it want? As they stood frozen in anticipation, a sudden gust of wind swept down the alley, carrying with it the acrid scent of smoke and ash. The figure's head jerked up, its gaze shifting to the horizon. For a moment, it seemed frozen in place, as if addressing something that hung in the air. "What's happening?" Ryan asked, his voice still barely above a whisper. Nick's eyes locked onto the horizon, his expression grim. "I don't know," he said, his voice flat. "But I think we're about to find out. Then it's going to get even worse if that's the plan." Jake's words hung in the air like a challenge, his anxiety palpable and almost contagious. He clutched the scanner in his hand for comfort, his eyes darting wildly between the figure and his fellow team members, searching for some sign of reassurance. Maria exchanged a tense glance with Nick before her gaze returned to the figure. She took a deep, measured breath and stepped forward, her movements unhurried as she coaxed the others to follow her. This close, she could see the figure's limbs unfolding, the muscles beneath its skin undulating in a subtle yet unmistakable ripple. Ryan trailed behind, his radar gun held at the ready, his eyes glued to the figure's face as if searching for some hint of its intentions. Nick brought up the rear, his backpack thumping against his shoulders, a constant reminder of the supplies and equipment that had brought them to this point. As they drew closer, the cold air began to vibrate with electricity. the hairs on the back of Johnson's neck standing on end as he strained to lock onto anything that might explain this phenomenon. "It's here," he mouthed silently to Maria, his words one of desperate prayer. Maria didn't flinch, her eyes fixed steadfastly on the figure's face as it began to shift slightly. Suddenly, a tendril of smoke curled from the air at its feet, swirling and spinning like a tiny tornado. Jake's heart stuttered in his chest as Maria's arm tightened around his shoulders, holding him in place. "Please don't leave now," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting towards the smokescreen. "We need to see what's going on here." Nick muttered under his breath, his hand slipping for his pistol. "This is off." Ryan froze, his grip on the radar gun wavering slightly as he shifted between his role as tracker and caution as fear took hold. "Too late for all that," the figure said in a low, husky voice that washed over them like a chill. Silence it pauses in the shadows, its eyes fixed on Maria as if studying her, its gaze unsettling. The team's collective breathing becomes shallow, the air thick with tension. The crunching sound of the figure's footsteps is amplified in the silence, making every step feel like a countdown to something. Ryan's grip on the radar gun tightens, his knuckles white as he strains to see the figure's features. His eyes dart to Jake, then back to the mysterious form as if seeking reassurance. The faint moonlight casts eerie shadows on the ground, making it seem as if the figure is seeping into their world. Maria's hand remains on Ryan's shoulder, providing a sense of comfort and control. She takes a deep breath, her voice rising above the stifling stillness. "It seems unafraid of us, at least." The figure remains frozen, its unyielding stare piercing the darkness. Nick's grip on his backpack slackens, his eyes flicking between the figure and the team. "That might not be a bad thing," he says, his voice measured. "Maybe it's curious." Jake's whisper barely rises above the silence. "Curious or hunting us?" As if in response to Jake's question, the figure takes another deliberate step forward. The air shudders with the sound, like a living entity breathing. The team shifts, their steps becoming more deliberate as they back away, desperate to maintain a safe distance. Ryan's eyes snap to the radar gun, now a frail barrier between them and the figure. Ryan grabbed the coordinates, Maria says, her voice steady but bracing for the worst. In the darkness, shadows seem to twist and writhe as if alive, the unknown shape deepening their fear. Time stretches like a razor-sharp blade, poised to slice through their fragile hopestime, stood still for a lifetime as the figure drew nearer, its intentions and nature hanging precariously in the balance. The group's collective heart rate was a nervous metronome, each beat echoing through the alley like a countdown to a catastrophe. A faint cry escaped Jake's lips as the figure inched closer, its icy presence flooding the alley with an unmistakable chill. The very air seemed to thicken, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with foreboding, each particle of oxygen pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Maria's hand tightened around the edge of her pack, her knuckles white as she leaned in closer to Jake. She offered a reassuring smile, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of desperation. The danger was palpable, their very survival hanging by a thread. Ryan's eyes locked onto the figure, a fresh wave of terror sweeping over him like a tidal wave. His voice was barely audible, yet the words still rang out clear as day. "Does anyone know what it is?" Nick shook his head, his face creasing into a concerned map of lines. "Looks human, but—" "Wrong," he muttered, his words laced with an undercurrent of dread. Dr. Luis Hernandez, a soft-spoken biologist, whispered a single thing. "Atmospheric readouts are fluctuating wildly. The creature's exposure to our equipment is causing unpredictable changes in the environment." The sound was almost imperceptible, yet Maria's ears picked up the resonance of Lewis's words like a siren in the depths of her mind. She felt a spark of clarity ignite within her, igniting a desperate plan to stall for time. Without breaking stride, the figure took another step forward. Jake's eyes darted around the group, a fearful search for reassurance, but they all seemed frozen too, each lost in their own private world of uncertainty. Maria's hand remained firmly in place, offering the only sense of security in this precarious moment. Nick adjusted the strap of his backpack, a fidgety attempt to distract himself from the tension building in the air. Ryan's hand still grasped his radar gun, and he watched the figure with a mix of fascination and trepidation. The figure halted another step closer, its gaze sweeping over the group like a cold, calculated breeze. Still, its features remained hidden and its expression remained impenetrable. The team waited, paralyzed, as the silence between them grew thicker, a palpable, heavy fog that threatened to overwhelm. It was Dr. Helen Lee, an archaeologist specializing in ancient civilizations, who broke the spell. Her voice, soft and measured, wove itself into the void. "Look closer," she suggested, her eyes glinting with curiosity. "We may learn something from this entity." As if echoing her words, the figure paused once more, raising a hand towards its own face as if adjusting an invisible mask. The air vibrated with anticipation, the team's collective breath held. Maria stepped back ever so slightly to reassess the situation. Her eyes didn't leave the figure's face, yet her hand on Nick's shoulder tightened ever so slightly. Jake shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes straining with anxiety. Suddenly, the figure spoke. The silence that enveloped the team's collective heart was matched only by the storm brewing in its own chest. "Why have you come to this place?" Its voice like ice shattering in the vacuum of space. The team held its collective breath, each lost in their own thoughts, unsure how they would respond to the stranger's question, unsure what lay hidden beneath this entity's unyielding mask.